Hello everyone and welcome back to Online Accounting. This week we're going to be talking about flexible budgets, standard costs, variances, and management by exception. Let's start with flexible budgets. So in the last week we did our master budget and it assumed one set level of production, one set level of sales. And that's fine for creating the master budget, but we may want something called a flexible budget, which allows us to see what net income is going to look like at multiple expected levels of sales and or production. If you remember back when we did the chapter where we were calculating net income and contribution margin, remember we had our optimistic, our pessimistic, and our most likely in the middle. So this is the same kind of concept. We can say, well, here's what we think is going to happen or what we're planning for, but what happens if we sell a little bit less? What happens if we sell a little bit more? And we can do as many flexible budgets as we need to get a good range so we understand what happens if the amount that we're hoping to sell isn't exactly what happens. Okay, that's how we're gonna start off with flexible budgets. Then we're gonna start looking at our standard costs, which is our ideal. So standard costs are basically what we think it should cost us to produce our product. So we have engineers working and production managers and all different people, and they come up and they say, okay, we're gonna make this product, and in order to do that, we need X amount of pounds of materials. Maybe we need 2 pounds of materials for each unit, and we go to our purchasing manager, and our purchasing manager says, well, the materials should cost us $5 a pound. Maybe it's not pounds, whatever it is, okay. And so those become our standards. This is what we think things should cost. We say, oh, well, it should take 3 hours of direct labor per unit, and on average, we pay our people $30 an hour, and that becomes our standard. And we do the same thing for overhead. What this allows us to do is we compare our standard costs, what we think it should cost us for any given level of production, to our actual costs. What did it cost us to produce that same number of units? So if we produce 10,000 units, we say, well, we know what it should have cost us to produce 10,000 units. What did it actually cost us? And then we engage in something called management by exception, where we really just focus on the largest variances, or at least focus on those first. So what this allows us to do is imagine we're running a whole business or maybe a huge factory, and all kinds of things are going on and we're not sure what to focus on. Management by exception gives us that focus. It says, focus on your big variances. So we can go through and say, well, the biggest variance was in direct materials. And as a matter of fact, it turns out it's because we were paying more than the standard. Then we can go talk to the purchasing manager and say, why are we paying more? And maybe she'll say, well, our main supplier went out of business, or there's an increase in the cost of the raw materials. Maybe, the price of gold went up and we use gold in our product. So the management by exception allows us to find the cause of our biggest variances between what we actually spent and what we thought we would spend to make that many units, and focus there so we can figure out what went wrong, see if we can fix it. So those are the two things we're going to be looking at this week. We're going to start with flexible budgets, then we're going to go into looking at our actual cost versus our standard cost and looking at those variances, first calculating them and kind of understanding what they mean. That's the plan, and I hope you have a good time, and we'll talk to you later. All right, have a good one.